morning, we read 5 through 15. We only got through down through verse 7. I'm going to go ahead and read this section again. I'll get you guys to pick up again when we get into this 16 through 21 section in just a moment. But let me go ahead and refresh our memories. Let me begin in verse 5, and I'll read down through verse 15, where Paul said, "For I consider that I am not all inferior to the most eminent apostle. Even though I am untrained in speech, yet I am not in knowledge, but we have been thoroughly manifested among you in all things. Did I commit sin in humbling myself, that you might be exalted, because I preached the gospel of God to you free of charge? I robbed other churches, taking wages from them to minister to you. And when I was present with you and in need, I was a burden to no one. For what I lacked, the brethren who came from Macedonia supplied, and everything I kept myself from being burdensome to you, and so I will keep myself. As the truth of Christ is in me, no one shall stop me from this boasting in the regions of Achaia." Why? Because I do not love you? God knows. But what I do, I will also continue to do, that I may cut off the opportunity from those who desire an opportunity to be regarded just as we are in these things, of which they boast. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. Boy, we get a pretty good picture of what's going on here. All right. We discussed last week this idea of, obviously Paul's wondering, why am I considered a sinner for what I did? I preached to you free of charge. We didn't spend any time talking about this, but it does give us, as Mark mentioned in his prayer, a pattern as far as the New Testament church and how we do things. What is authorized? I have churches that support me. Okay? Now, here's the question. Would it have been okay for those churches to send the money to the church at Corinth, and then the church at Corinth pay Paul? What's the difference?
Then they're telling the church, this is what you're going to do, and not just think supporting Paul.
Okay.
They're supporting the church.
Okay, I like that. Anything else, Mark?
Well, let's take this example. Let's say that you were in a congregation of people who were erring from the gospel, and you were trying to teach them the error of their way. And let's say that the people who were writing your paycheck decided that they didn't want you to correct that error. So they could stop you because by withholding the money that was sent by another church to pay your salary, they would have an influence there that God knew would happen and did not include that in the pattern of the New Testament church.
Okay, I like this. You guys are thinking about this. And Tony?
Sort of similar to what Mark said. If that church is to send the other church money, that's too much for all of getting this amount out of it.
Right. And so what you're telling me right off the bat then is that these congregations would lose control. These congregations have no say in what's going on. All of a sudden, all that is transferred to here, and then they have the say. What we're noticing here is that those congregations sent money directly to Paul. And it's not a small thing that we spend time on this, because this is what has separated churches of Christ, those who have gone on and teaching things that are in error. And there are many in Evansville, and there are even churches of Christ in Newburgh. And people, and for lack of a better term, most of it centers around the use of the Lord's money. And Paul is telling us here that he robbed other churches. Now, we know what that doesn't mean. Okay, how we use the term today. Well, those churches supported Paul to do what? Yeah. And Marty, you wanted to say something earlier. Go ahead.
I guess it's relevant, but we got a perfect example today. What's going on in Vatican, the problems they're having. I mean, if you read the paper, you see That's been ongoing before this last pope got elected.
Right.
And that problem is all about that sign you made, the dollar sign.
Yeah.
It's the money trail. And they've got that thing so convoluted and complex that they themselves can't figure it out.
Well, that's it. And you know, this illustration, this drawing I have over here already has confused the main point I wanted to get, and that is we need to understand is congregations are self-governing. What's another word we use for that? They are autonomous, self-governing. Sounds like a big word. Where's that in the Bible? Do you read self-governing? Do you read self-governing? Well,
you read the action.
yeah, you read them and say, you know, feed the church, which is, you know, feed the flock, which is among you. I mean, that among you, not elders. You don't oversee another congregation, okay? And if those, I don't know how many were here on Monday night, went to the meeting at Northwest, but Mike was talking about when he was went to Samoa, and there were a number of churches that were being overseen by churches in America. And you talked about the problems that they were running into because they were being governed by churches that are in the United States. And of course, the whole point was getting back to this idea that they're self-governing. Paul is trying to drive this point home here, and he says, you know, you have a problem with me, but look, if they supported me, they supplied my needs so that I can preach the gospel. They're supporting this man. The churches that support me, are they supporting the work here? The churches that support me, are they supporting the work here? They're supporting me. Okay, we need to understand that. It might be a matter of semantics there. It's not a big issue. I'm not saying, you know, you're wrong like you've sinned in saying that. But I'm saying we need to clearly understand that they're not supporting the work, they're supporting the man. Because if they're supporting the work, what happens when I move? The work stays here, right? I mean, if they want to support me, which happened, I was in Toronto, and they said, Chuck, where are you moving? I said, well, I'm moving to Newburgh. Well, we're going to continue to support you where you go. So the money followed me down here. They continued to support me. Well, what happened to Toronto? Well, it's still there. The work is still going on. Gene?
The important thing here is there's churches supporting you. So those churches have to be responsible and whatnot to make sure what you're teaching and what you're saying, because if they don't, in other words, of course you've got local members in the congregation,
Right.
but you're not going to get the pressure from the congregation as much as you do from the people. Like if they come in like these men came in the other day, and I assume they support you where they came from.
Right, right.
So that's where it's important, because if that's not done, it can be really bad.
Well, and the reason why we're slowing down and focusing on this, guys, because as a local congregation, Lord willing, you know, I mean, we have goals, we have ambitions, and Lord willing, in less than 3 years, we could be self-supporting, which is kind of cool, all right? And so we need to understand as a local church, and I say we, as a local church, what our responsibilities are. And so when we are in a position here, I don't want to mess my hand up and rub all that up, but when we're in a position over here, oh, the straw's over here, when we're over here, and we're going to use funds to support people, to preach the gospel, what kind of responsibility, and Gene was talking about that, what kind of responsibilities do we have towards this man? It's the same responsibilities they have towards me right now, and Gene's talking about that. So what is the responsibility that they have? Warren? That's it. Their responsibility is to make sure that they don't want to support error. Okay, that's the key. So there needs to be communication, is there not? I mean, I've probably told you guys this before, but you know, these churches that support me, you know, I've had the opportunity when people call me up and say, Chuck, can you come and hold us a meeting? I say, okay. I've pretty much filled what I want to do this year. But one of these churches call me and say, Chuck, can you come and visit with us? What am I going to say?
Yes.
Yeah, priority one, okay? Because these are the folks that are supporting me, which I'm going in February to one of the churches supporting me, going to go there and hold them a 4-day meeting. And I sit down with the elders and we talk with them. They want to know about what's going on, and they ask me questions about different things. And guys, we're going to do that. Are we just going to send money when somebody writes us a letter? What are we going to do?
Check them out.
What do you mean? How do you check them out?
Make sure they're teaching.
How do you do that?
Ask them. Go or have them come here.
Yeah, you get a letter from somebody who's looking for support, and we have some funds to do it. We ask them, you come here, or you get them on the phone, and we talk about it. Usually somebody that you know, but you know, that he knows that you know. And but in other words, you have the responsibility. Is that being too nosy? Is the point, Matt?
I think you also have the responsibility to continue that investigation, so to speak. You don't just, anybody can put up, you know, a face for a short amount of time to get what they want. I mean, you see it in job interviews where, oh yeah, I'm the greatest worker ever, and you hire them and it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Good point.
And you've got to maintain that they're still teaching the truth and that they didn't just put on a show to get the
We're not Calvinists. It's, you know, the once saved, always saved. You know, it's like once a faithful gospel preacher, always a faithful gospel preacher. We have supported people when I was in congregation. We supported a guy that changed his position on marriage. We called him up, and he refused to tell us what he taught. He says, we're just asking you this. We've heard some rumors. What do you teach about this? Well, a lot of people have different views. What do you teach about this? Da, 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 da. And he would never answer us. We said, guess what? We're finished. We're finished. If you don't have the conviction to tell us what you believe the Bible teaches about something, we as a congregation are not going to support that. And we gave him chance after chance after chance. Mark. I saw another hand over. Gene, it was Gene.
I had an experience where in Northwest, they got the letter, and I called and talked to the guy. You know, was talking, asked questions and whatnot. And I was getting to a place he wasn't too friendly. And he basically come out and told me, well, if you all going to decide to support me, then, you know, I'll talk about that. I said, thank you.
Yep, there you go. Okay, so we're basing this, for those who have come in, we're talking what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 11, verse 8. I robbed other churches, taking wages from them to minister to you. Is it okay for a man to receive income? Now, here's my question for you. Since it's all part of this and helps this church become strong, and so you don't think that you're doing something wrong when you make inquiries about somebody, does this church have the right to know how much this church is supporting? You mean I can tell these people the other income I have is none of your business?
Oh,
Well, you can tell.
you can tell that.
But if you're gonna have an autonomous model,
No, what I'm saying is, can this church say, Chuck, who else is supporting you?
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
I can find out.
yeah, but they're
This-
asking you, they're not talking to each other.
No. They're talking to me. They're saying, does this church have a right to know what this church is giving me? They don't. I mean, might not specifically know which church, but do they have a right to know what churches are supporting me? How much?
Oh, yeah,
Absolutely, they have that.
yes,
I could be making $300,000 a year.
yes.
Usually, Chuck, when you get the letter, most cases, it's listed.
It's what? Yeah, right. Yeah. It's common sense, but I'm just trying to educate people here that you have the right as a congregation. When he talked about robbed other churches and received wages from them, other congregations supported me or supported Paul in this case, and they're aware of that. We as a congregation, if we're ever in a situation where we will support somebody, I don't want us to ever think that, well, that's none of our business if he gets support from somewhere else, or how much support he's getting. That's our business. That is our business.
The important thing is, if you're supporting the work someplace where it's really, I mean, they're doing real good, and like you said, well, you know, an opinion, and you have a choice to support some work that's just getting started and trying to start a congregation, say a preacher, then I'm going to go with the one that's needing the most needs.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up, because this whole subject of supporting the preacher and what we have here is this is from this text, by the way. When this comes up, and I've discussed this with people, and they'll ask, is it scriptural for a church to support a preacher, like this case, when this congregation has funds that they could help? Is it scriptural? Is this wrong? I've actually been at places when this congregation found out that this had a few dollars, they immediately cut them off. What do you have here? What's going on at Corinth, by the way? What is going on, guys? We've been talking about the last 3 weeks. What's going on at Corinth? What did these false teachers do to make Paul look bad?
They accused him of not taking their money.
So what's inferred within that? That Corinth had some money? So Corinth had some money, but Paul, what was Paul's attitude? We read in this text. He didn't want to burden them. And these brethren were glad to help Paul do that in this situation. So I don't want us to think that, they have to do some investigating here. If you support the man, you've got a relationship there. There needs to be a trust factor there. Obviously, a local congregation, we want to become self-supporting. That is our goal. I think that if this congregation is supporting 10 guys in other places to preach the gospel, and they're not supporting their own local guy,
The priorities are wrong.
something's array there. Something's amiss, and we just need to be mindful of that.
That can happen. In other words, if a member visits someplace and they've got, you find out they've got $30,000 in the bank and they're not doing anything.
Right.
Because probably some members there, oh no, we want to hold on to that.
Right.
But you're supporting the preacher?
Yeah.
Then the word needs to go out to that congregation through the preacher. And I know if it happened, the next business meeting, he gets a raise. But that does happen.
Yeah, I just want you guys to see that this is all practical. There's a pattern in the Bible. Okay, there's a pattern. This is not Church of Christ doctrine. This is the doctrine of Christ. That we learn about the pattern of how the New Testament church was organized. You have elders and deacons, you have teachers and evangelists. So you have the local churches organized. They take up a collection on a weekly basis for the work of the church, for evangelism, edification, and benevolence. And part of that is supporting the local man. Preaching, it's okay to support a man to preach the gospel. We get that from this text. I want you to, just remember this. People, I've actually talked with people and they say this person needs to take a vow of poverty if he's going to dedicate himself to preach the gospel. Where'd that come from, guys? Denominationalism. They think that you need to be like a monk, you need to cut yourself off, or you just need to be somebody that you've taken this vow of poverty where I have nothing because I'm going to go preach the gospel. That didn't come from here. That came from denominations. That concept of really what should be expected out of somebody who preaches the gospel. You shouldn't have anything. Now, you don't want to go to the other extreme either. Mark.
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting you point that out. These vows of poverty, and a lot of times these people live in palaces.
Yes.
They don't have any money, but they live in the Taj Mahal.
Right. Exactly. And Paul talked about in his life. Do you guys recall a passage? How did Paul describe his financial support over the years? Anybody remember? Sometimes he was something, and sometimes he was something else. Do you remember what he said? Sometimes he was hungry, and sometimes he was full. Okay, so there were times when he had enough, and sometimes when he didn't have enough. And we face that, right? And of course, that's no different than you guys. Sometimes things are going well, and then sometimes unexpected finances come up, and things are kind of lean, and then it balances out. And so Paul describes that. And so within this, Paul mentions that in verse 9, and when I was present with you and in need, I was a burden to no one. For what I lacked, the brethren who came from Macedonia supplied it. So here he is. When I was in need, he confesses I was there. But I was a burden for no one. But the brethren helped me out. So what should the man do if he's in need? Make it known. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I've been To give you the tangibles, guys, I can remember working for a congregation and working with a congregation, and then I said, well, what will it take to support you here? I said, well, I don't know the cost of living here. Why don't you guys just come up with a figure, and after 3 months, we'll get together and we'll see how things are going. So after 3 months, we get together, we have a business meeting, they say, how are things going? I said, well, actually, it's a little bit hard. I says, we actually have more bills, more going out than's coming in. That's just the most simplest way to put it. And so we just went from there. You have to have communication. You need to talk about that and go from there. Paul, needs are genuine. Okay? You have needs. And so I want us to understand that the relationship that they are to have with, let's make this guy the local man. We're not sending man for. What should the relationship be with this man? Are all you guys their boss? Are you their boss?
That's where you get into trouble with preachers that begin, the congregation gets controlled and a preacher starts preaching on divorce and remarriage, and you got people that are divorced and they're like, well, we don't want to hear that, so if you keep doing that, we're going to pull. You're finding that person's responsibility is to God, not to the individual people.
Okay, so his responsibility is to the Lord. We get that, God, in preaching the truth. But let's talk about this relationship, because Paul is talking about here that these false teachers were actually trying to destroy the relationship that he had with the brethren at Corinth. Okay, that's what happens. Got to watch that in local congregations. You really don't want the local man. I guess I'm preaching to myself here and letting us understand that we have a special relationship here, and we need to make sure it's done the way the Lord approves of. First of all, you don't want me to be treated like, well, we're on the air here, but you just don't want to be treated like a god, okay? We never question him, and let's throw as much money at him as we possibly can, because, we're nothing without him. Well, what will happen to my head if that happens? Look, it's a big old swelled head. We don't want that to happen. Of course, I don't want the attitude either. Well, you guys need to thank your lucky stars that I'm here. Have that arrogance either way, or you guys have the arrogance of, well, you should be thankful that we even have you here preaching for us. There needs to be that balance that is there. And what I'm wanting us to discuss is what's necessary for that to work, Mark.
What you described there, and I'm a little torn about this because I can see how you can make the argument anyway, but there has to be accountability between the person, the evangelist, and the local work. There has to be that, because you have, and I'm just saying this hypothetically, because you could have an individual that decides, okay, I think I'm going to take next month off.
Right.
And if there's no accountability,
yeah,
then okay, he's not going to be here next month, so we've got to do whatever is necessary. So, and in the same thing, you don't want a bunch of what Matt just described, where if you preach on something that we need to hear, maybe some of us don't want to hear it. We also don't need somebody, putting the pressure on you to change your message, because that's
it.
Any of those scenarios, and when it becomes, the church revolves around the individual, that's the beginning of the end.
Well, it even goes beyond just his preaching. It also affects, the danger is too that you bring a young guy in here, and to preach for you guys after I'm dead and gone, but you bring a preacher in here and he drives up and he's got a newer vehicle. What are you buying that for? Well, where'd you get up buying that? In other words, you feel like you should dictate everything that he should use his money for. That's dangerous. But yeah, there's accountability. Everybody's accountable in this congregation to who? Absolutely. So if they're sin in here, it needs to be dealt with, right? And if the preacher's not doing his job, he's to do the work. What was Timothy told by Paul? Do the work of an evangelist. If the person is being supported to do the work of an evangelist and he's not doing the work of an evangelist, what do? Let's take it to the next step. He's not going to do the work of an evangelist, but he wants that check. What are you going to do? Guys, got to get tough. Gene?
Maybe I got lost. The dots in that big circle are congregations.
No, this is a local church. This is a local church. This is us. This is us here.
I thought those were congregations.
Oh, no. And I'm just,
the preacher that was preaching.
yeah. I just came up with an illustration of how does the congregation get along with the preacher in the local
It's not
sense.
responsibility, I say others.
And if you have elders, and if you don't have elders, we still get that accountability. We've been dealing with this aspect of accountability. You see, they were charging Paul here, right? They were challenging Paul by saying, you didn't take our money. And so I'm trying to get us to talk about this relationship that should exist within the congregation, which Paul obviously thought was okay until these bad guys came in and started slamming him in front of these other brethren, turning them against him, and that can happen. Keith, you had your hand up about 5 minutes ago.
I was just going to say that, I've been in a situation where the local evangelist of the congregation we were at, he was trained professionally as through college, had a degree in something. And at some point he approached the elders about wanting to take on an added job doing this professional career so he wouldn't lose his license and that sort of thing.
Right.
The elders basically said at the time they didn't think that was good for the work there in that area because they need someone that was full-time committed to that work. Now that person moved on somewhere else that allowed him to do that because they had 2 preachers, so they were able to do that.
Okay.
But the situation, it's just like you said, we're accountable to each other, and also the oversee, the elders and their oversight of the work as well. So that's all I was going to say.
And that's good because I think that we need to understand that there are judgment calls that need to be made within a congregation. Could Paul here have taken funds from the brethren at Corinth?
Yes.
That was it, right? That wouldn't have been sinful. Okay, so that was a judgment call on Paul's part. He said, I'm just going to make this call. I don't want your support. I've got other people that are supporting me right now. That's just a judgment call that I'm going to make. And there are times when, as a congregation, we make a judgment call. Sometimes on who's coming and how much to support the person. But as Keith talks about, I've known congregations that says, okay, we'd love to have you come and work with us. And he goes, well, I have I drive a bus to keep my health insurance up, and they'll save me some money. So do you guys have any problems as a congregation? Communicate. Do you have any problems with me driving a bus in the mornings and in the afternoons? And while I'm working with y'all, and I know in congregations, hey, we're good with that. We're good with that. But the judgment calls Keith's talking about, where somebody might say, well, we just think that that's going to infringe on a lot of your time. When to have studies, what you're saying is you can't study in the morning, you can't study between 4 and 5. And, we just think that if you want to do that, you probably have a better fit somewhere else. We're not saying it's sin. It's a judgment call, guys. You understand that? And elders need to be respected in this. Our local congregations need to be respected in this. I have seen people absolutely go ballistic. When a church decided after many years that, we have now decided that we're going to support somebody else now. Do they have a right to do that? They have every right to do that. It might be a tough pill to swallow. I've been in congregation. I've had congregation, Chuck, our situation, we're going to cut back on your support a little bit. Now, you might have to write somebody else to pick up that if you want, but, well, should I write them a scathing letter? I mean, come on, tell the brethren to dig a little deeper. It's like, come on. It's like, you got to respect church autonomy and judgment calls and go from there. And that's all Paul was trying to get the brethren here to understand. Look, it's a judgment call. These brethren were supporting me. They're good with it. They were good with the fact of coming to help my needs. Some of these churches might say, well, how come the church of Corinth isn't helping them? They understood. We're supporting Paul. We're going to support him. Paul has needs. We're going to help him. All is good, brethren, until these rascals come in and say, he didn't even want to take your money. And guys, feel free to cut me off if there's something else you want to expand on and have questions about. Nancy.
Sometimes couldn't they say, well, he's taking money from these other churches and they're doing what, he's doing what they want him to do and not going and teaching. They may tell him, this is how you're gonna do things and not really work.
Well, yeah, you've got to be careful of that too. You're absolutely right. If any church that supports me dictates to me and says, you know, you don't need to be preaching on such, forget about it, man. I mean, whether locally or somewhere else, you know, I am to preach the gospel, bottom line. You know, I like Diotrephes. We wondered how to handle problems. Remember Diotrephes? He wanted the preeminence within the church, and brethren stood against him. And that's the way it's supposed to be. You need to speak up. Because, by the way, the use of the church funds, when you give, if the local church here uses them wrong, in a wrong way, are you excused?
You have to say something.
Yeah, absolutely. You're aware of what the funds go for. You know, Mark puts up the financial report. If you want to know exactly everything that's going on there, to sit back and say, well, I gave, you know, what it goes for. I don't particularly care. Well, what we're noticing here is that we do care as a congregation to make sure it's used in a scriptural way. What we're studying today is what is a scriptural way and what's an unscriptural way. An unscriptural way would be to send all the money to the church at Corinth, and then Corinth supports people. And that goes on in a lot of churches of Christ across the land. They think there's no difference. If Chuck, you know, grab an amount here. If we give Chuck if that totals $1,000, what's the difference if we send it there and they give Chuck $1,000? Guys, bottom line, what's the difference if I get $1,000 this way or if I get $1,000 the other way? And I want you to tell me the only main answer to that. One has authority and one doesn't. It's as simple as that. People can argue all they want and say, it comes out the same. Take up a collection on Wednesday. You have the same people there. What's the difference between doing that and doing it Sunday morning? Answer? Authority. Once you throw authority, the concept of a pattern out the door, seriously, if we just want to rationalize that and say, okay, really, I think we're a little too strict on this. What happens if we say there is no pattern? What happens? What happens if there's no pattern? Everything. There is, with the word pattern, guys, comes the word standard. If you don't have a standard, then it's open season on any idea you have. And it'll be total chaos. The Lord knew exactly what he was doing here. People say, well, I think you guys just inferred that. The Lord didn't actually stipulate a pattern. No, he absolutely knew what he was doing with the local church. And it works if we abide by his ways.
If the congregation here does not have a concern or doesn't feel at ease because other congregations are sending you money. So if we just kind of sit here sleeping, then you can do anything you want to if you want to.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. And I mean, I'm not going to mention names. I'm not going to mention where, but I mean, when I got hired, when I went to work at a congregation, I went down in the building, in the basement, into the office. Guys, seriously, the preacher left in a hurry. There was a thing that thick, and it was just family after family after family after family, and it wrote how much money he was getting. I mean, I just looked at this and went, you have got, good night. I never did add it up. But yeah, he was being supported by churches. These were individuals that were giving him money. And I'm thinking, well, did you guys know that he was getting, none of my business, but I'll tell you, it's a lesson to me. Can you take advantage of churches? Absolutely. Gotta be careful with that. Churches know, the communication I have with them, every one of them gets a financial statement. They know exactly how much. I only tell you that again because there have been churches that get support letters from preachers, and the church will say, can you send us a financial report? And they'll say, that's none of your business. You write them back and say, that is our business. You send us a financial report. How much money you're getting. We have that because we're accountable to God here. It's not like we're trying to be nosy. We're accountable to God. And so when somebody comes along and says, that's none of your business, that is our business. Okay? That is our business. Now look, he goes on here again. Remember, if there's some other scenario you want to bring up, because we want to make sure we cover everything within this of the Lord's money supporting a preacher, what the limitations are, and sometimes there's a lot of judgment calls within that, and you need to work with them. There needs to be communication. I think that's important too, within that situation. Now he says in verse 10, when he said, I didn't want to be a burden to you, and so I keep myself, verse 10 says, as the truth of Christ is in me, no one shall stop me from this boasting in the regions of Achaia. Why? Because I do not love you? God knows. The whole scenario, now we're back to Paul here, being supported by churches and preaching at Corinth. Did I do that because I don't love you? What? Can you imagine? Somebody's doing something kind to you and somebody twists it around like, they don't love you. What? That would be like going up to Mark and Lori after, 10 of us there yesterday and going up to them and say, no, it's on us. We don't want anything. We just wanted to help out because Mark was injured and he's in the hospital. Can you imagine Lori started crying? You don't love us. Doesn't make any sense. That'd be silly. And that's what, and you and I say that's silly, but you know what? When you have people like he described here, it's amazing how people can turn something good into something so ugly because of what he says here. Such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of light. He talked about Satan himself does that. So it shouldn't be a surprise that, or a great thing that there are ministers who also transform themselves into righteousness, these ministers of Satan. We say, how could that possibly be? It's amazing how people can be so sly with their conversation. Just twist it a little bit to cast doubt. Well, that was nice what they did yesterday. I wonder what they have in mind for you guys down the road. Lori and Mark go, what? Just a little comment. Just throw something in there to put something negative on something positive. That was kind of good that they did that, but you should have heard some of the conversation going on while they were working. What? You got to watch out for people like this. That's what he talks about. Now, how are you and I going to spot somebody when he describes them? Well, wait a second. He says, they're false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. Good grief. How do you spot somebody like that?
Know your scriptures.
Know the scriptures?
Go to the source.
What's that?
Go to the person they're talking about.
Okay. Anything else? Know them by their fruits. And a huge one, don't forget what you already know. These brethren labored with Paul over 3 years. And all of a sudden they're trying to say something. It's like somebody coming up to you and if somebody came up to me and said, hey, I saw your wife in Walmart the other day, man. She was cussing that lady out. And I went, no, I don't think that was my wife. Probably somebody else. Pretty sure. I'm absolutely, maybe, no. Depends on what it was. No. Yeah, when you know, you don't forget. And people are quick. People can be very quick to turn on people. Why is that? It's almost like people want to believe a lie sometimes. Dave, you had a point?
Well, a clarification. Doesn't it depend on an individual situation whether or not congregations should send funds to another congregation? Because we were in a situation like that ourselves, where other congregations helped us out. Right?
No, individuals.
Those were individuals, not a church sent money.
Individuals.
Yeah, this church is not going to send money to this church so they can build themselves a building.
But an individual could.
An individual can do anything they want with their money. Okay? You understand what the church can do with their money, and this is what people think. People think that the church can use They're funds for any, quote, good work. Okay, any, quote, good work. No, you can't. And the responsibilities that we have is to make sure that we do things on the up and up and according to what God has said. And yet on an individual basis, churches can do that. Now, we do have examples in the Bible where churches sent money directly to other churches, do we not? For what? For benevolence. There were needy saints, right? And you could send money directly. I'm telling you, if we got, the Katrina hit, if we had something similar to that hit us, you guys are all our homes are under 10 feet of water. We've got nothing. Brethren could send money to the church here, and Tim and I would disperse it to anyone who has a need and take care of that. Did you have your hand up, Mark?
Well, I was going to say that, the common thread in our discussion this morning has been money.
Right.
And money has many properties. It has some pretty costly properties as well. Because, you can always drill down on a problem, and money is not too far away from that problem. And I think God, in His wisdom, has limited these types of events that involve passing the money around, because the church mission is to teach the gospel.
Yeah.
And when we cannot let things sidetrack the church from its mission of teaching the gospel.
And I find it so interesting. Our whole conversation today was about money. That's what Paul's talking about here. And the sad part is, it was about people who didn't take money. It seems like most of the problems we have today is people who are greedy. Okay? And of course, that who knows what their ultimate goal was, these false apostles that came in. What's their ultimate goal there? Is maybe to say, Paul wouldn't take your money, but we want your money. Maybe the bottom line is greed there. That's a way to get money from them, is to turn them against him for not doing it. Say, man, you mean people who take money really show they love? Yes. So give me money and you'll know how much I love you. I don't know what's going on there, but I tell you, these rascals are pretty sharp. And so next week we're going to be focusing on what they were forcing Paul to do in boasting, which he really didn't want to do. But thank you for your comments today, guys. I really appreciate it. Very important subject.
I don't have